I know the time will come when we welcome everyone, yeah. Even the young and the old. We're here to soothe your soul.
So I think most of you here know me already. This is a subject that is very close to my heart, not just because I have children, but because I think it's important that we, as Kelvin said, that we talk about the children and raising children. I'm just going to really skim across the surface of like quite a lot of points today. I'll try not to get like too stuck on one point. I have a tendency to do that because there's some topics that I'll like bring up that I really want to discuss in more detail, but I'll just try and skim over things today because it's only a short presentation. So a little bit about me. I thought a good way to tell you a bit about me is to show you some of my online aliases. So Hippie Mama is a nickname that was given to me by my children. I don't know if it's the dreadlocks, the crazy clothes, but that's the name I've been given by my children. Unschool Mama is because my kids don't go to school. They've never been to school. I've got 2 children. They've always been home educated. Unschooling is a bit... I'm not too keen on labels, but it means that we don't really follow much of a... We don't follow a curriculum or much of a structure. It's kind of free, child-led learning. So that's where the unschool comes from. And then loquacious linguist, which is a bit of a different side to me. Loquacious because I love to talk, and linguist because I love languages. So that's just a little bit about me. And now some questions for you guys. Can you raise your hand here if you have children? Most people, okay. Now raise your hand again if before you had children, people told you it was going to be hard. Most people again. And then since you've had children, how many times have you thought, this is fucking hard? This is really hard. How many of you have stopped and thought, it shouldn't be this hard? Yeah? Yeah? So I do believe that parenting has never been easy since the dawn of time. There would have always been things that made it challenging, you know, raising another human being in the early days, survival, not letting them get eaten by a lion or whatever. But I do feel that nowadays it's a lot harder than it was and a lot harder than it should be. Why is it so hard? I think, there's a huge number of contributing factors which can be categorised into 3 main groups: distractions, barriers, and toxins. And there might be some things I've put in one category that could probably go in more than one. But in my opinion, a lot of these distractions and barriers have been created deliberately to separate the mother and child, father and child, to tear apart the family unit, really, and to make it more hard for us. The powers that shouldn't be, unfortunately, don't want happy, loving families. So we're going to look at some examples of these, but then we will look at how to overcome some of them. It's not going to be all doom and gloom. I don't do doom and gloom. So the distractions here, there's plenty of them, really, for parents and for children. So technology features in quite a few of those images there. You've got the family all sitting watching TV. Yeah, it's nice to watch movies together as a family, but it's become a big, big part of our lives, technology. And it can distract us from the truth, you know, but it can also distract us from each other within the family unit. The video games, the kid playing the video game there. Social media is a big distraction, I think, for a lot of people. And the beauty industry, I think particularly anyone's got like teenage girls, but that's a bit of a stereotype, but that's when it can become a real distraction for us. The newspapers with the agendas that they're pushing to distract us from what's really important. And then the kids in school, you know, and parents working. It is necessary to work for most of us, you know, most of us have to work. There's no doubt about that. But it can become, for some people, too much of a distraction, take us away from our children too much. And again, I think it's been designed like that. You know, life is becoming more difficult. We are having to work more hours just to make ends meet. So, work and bringing work home. A lot of parents are bringing work home with them, and they're not able to shut off when they get home from work and really be present with their children. And the same with school. I mean, my kids have never been to school, but I'm very aware of the pressure that there is on children. You know, the exams from such a young age, they're stressing out about exams and how clever they are. And it's not the sorts of things that kids need to have going on in their heads, you know. They should be free and playing and not distracted by that kind of stress. And another thing related to schools is, peers. Of course, children need peers, or so do adults. But what's happening nowadays is there's a phenomenon which was, I suppose, not discovered, but it was kind of put into these terms by someone called Gabor Mate. I'll be recommending one of his books, actually, in this presentation. And he calls it peer orientation. So what's happening now is that in the Western world particularly, kids are spending so much time at school and with their peers and then interacting with peers online, you know, when they're not in school, that it's almost like kids are being brought up by other kids. They're spending more time interacting with other children than they are with adults, which is damaging for many, many different reasons. Not only the education itself, but also the peers. And then the book above the school children, The Contented Baby, this is to represent the parenting experts. So within the mainstream, there are a lot of these parenting experts, and I don't believe that all of them are necessarily deliberately trying to sabotage, parenting and the relationships between parents and children. But from my experience and from the knowledge I've gained through my parenting journey, a lot of them can be quite detrimental. And again, a lot of them are trying to encourage you to impose these kind of routines and things on your children, and worrying so much about what your children should be doing and trying to get them to do certain things that you're distracted from who your children really are and what they really need. So the parenting experts can be a distraction. The next one is barriers. So again, we can see technology here. But also a lot of these pictures that I've put up here represent like cultural norms. So the cultural norms that we have are barriers to us connecting with our children and having close relationships. So there's the one of like the kind of more teenage kids lounging around at home, and they're all together, but they're not together because they're all in their own virtual worlds. They're not living in the real world. They're not present in the real world together. And then there's the family all using technology while they're out at a restaurant. One of my biggest bugbears is seeing people eating in a restaurant, but they're all on their phones. Why? Why have you gone to a restaurant? But it's become a norm. It's become really normal in our culture. So sometimes if families are not doing it, you know, they feel almost pressure to do it because that's what's normal. That's what everyone else is doing. And then the picture of the child like shouting, this is to represent desensitization. So our children are very much being desensitized to things like violence, bad language. Yeah, I do swear, but there is a limit to how much I swear around my kids and the kind of words I use. But they're being very desensitized to this kind of stuff, which has a real impact on the parenting because they will just say things and do things and not even think twice about it, you know, whereas years ago, before they had so much exposure to it, they wouldn't have dreamed of doing some of those things. But the desensitization is it's a big barrier, one that's quite difficult for me particularly, actually. What else have we got here? So above the child screaming with the with the knives and guns is this is to represent misinformation. So within the mainstream narrative, there's a lot of misinformation, you know, telling you what to do. Don't hesitate, vaccinate. They're telling you what to do. They're not giving you an opportunity to question it or think about it. There's a lot of other messages, you know, that are plugged into us and fed through us, if we choose to obviously plug into that sort of narrative. We've got the book with the padlock. That's to represent the hidden knowledge. So Kelvin mentioned this, and I think the knowledge which is hidden from us is a huge barrier to us really parenting our children and nurturing our children as well in the way that our ancestors did. But it is becoming unlocked. More and more people are unlocking it, and we are discovering this hidden knowledge. And the more we discover it, we can pass it on, and hopefully, it won't get lost forever. It will come back and live on. And then above the book, we've got a baby in a cot, and then the baby with the bottle. So these two, I suppose, they can represent the cultural norms, but also the separation, particularly in the early days after the baby is born. In the Western culture, it's very much about separation from mother and baby, and well, even father and baby, but particularly with the mother. There's a lot of separation, and that can be a huge barrier to bonding with your child, and it can have a knock-on effect actually for the rest of that child's life if they're separated from the mother for too long. We can't always be with our babies 24/7, but at the same time, they don't necessarily need to sleep in a cot. They can sleep with us. There is this option, but it's something, again, which I think more people are starting to talk about. It is starting to become a bit more normal, but it's definitely not the norm in our culture, not at the moment. And then next, we've got the toxins. So I think most of these pictures are self-explanatory. So why do toxins affect parenting? So the way I see it, some of these toxins on here can be quite addictive. So things like the junk food and pharmaceutical products can be quite addictive, and any kind of addiction, will alter your behaviour or your child's behaviour. So that can have a real effect on how you parent them and also your relationship with them. Any addiction within any family, it's really hard to deal with. Even if it's a sugar addiction, it's still an addiction. And the EMFs, which is represented by the 5G mask there, that's something which we're becoming more and more surrounded by. But also people are starting to come up with more and more solutions, as to how we can keep ourselves safe from these kind of toxins, which is promising. It's definitely promising. Then we've got the person shouting with all the negative words. Negative speech is a toxin which really affects our children. Our words are so powerful, and it's something I've become so much more mindful of in these last few years, is how we speak, to our children. Of course, I can't be, being mindful in itself is quite draining. It's not an easy thing to do, but our words really, really stick with the children. So if they're exposed a lot to the negative words and negative tones, then that will have a negative impact. But where we are feeling so stressed a lot of the time, we've got a lot of pressure, I suppose it's quite easy to lose your shit when you feel like that. We've also got the trauma. I suppose I don't really know if many people would categorise trauma as a toxin, but I didn't really know what other category to put it in. Trauma that we have, from this life, from our past lives, all of this, any kind of trauma, has an impact on how we are now and how we parent our children. So if we realise we have trauma and we can start to work through that, not only does it make our lives easier, but it can make parenting easier as well, potentially. The one below the pharmaceutical products, that just kind of represents, stress, overthinking, which I think we're all prone to at times, but making time to kind of quieten our mind is really important, because kids pick up on the stress as well. They really pick up on it, even when we're not saying it. And that if we're constantly in that state of stress and overwhelm, then our kids will pick up on that. And sometimes I think, why are my kids behaving like this? And then I think, no, hang on a minute. How are you behaving? How are you feeling? And usually when I take a look at myself, I'm like, okay, it's a mirror. It's a reflection of actually what I'm going through. So sometimes you have to look inside yourself. and realise how much it's impacting the children. And then there's like the cosmetics and the, all beauty products, which, you can buy natural products, but a lot of them have the toxins and the chemicals, which I suppose in relation to parenting, they could potentially make us sick, worst case scenario, and then nursing a sick child isn't always easy. So all of just those added stresses that we don't need in life really can be caused by toxins. I think I've covered everything there, all those pictures. With the pharmaceutical industry, and I said about the addictiveness, but also the amount of crap that is in pharmaceutical drugs. So sometimes it may be necessary, to access our healthcare service and to use the pharmaceutical products, but overuse of it or even misuse of it is definitely not good for our health. Definitely not. Now there's some pictures to make you smile because there was quite a lot of negative imagery, and I was talking about, negative things and how damaging things are. We need to have a balance. So hopefully these pictures make you smile. And I forgot to mention actually at the beginning, any picture that you see with a heart on, that's because at the last minute, my son decided that he does not consent to his image being in my presentation. So I had to go through and put little hearts on his face. So I'm kind of pleased that I've taught my children you don't have to consent to everything. But I was a bit like, hang on a minute, my presentation's tomorrow. I'm not changing all the pictures. I'll slap a heart on your face instead. And the picture on the right there is one of my favourite pictures of my children. It was taken many years ago, but I just think it was a beautiful moment that I captured there. The picture in the middle is me being a big kid again. I like doing that. When I don't break my ankle, I like it. It's good fun until someone gets hurt, as they say. So now, this is the more positive part, breaking down the barriers and, the distractions and the toxins. Once we're aware of the fact that these barriers and distractions are there and that they are making it more difficult for us, we can start breaking them down. And I'm not saying that any of these are easy, by the way, but we can start to break them down. Just give me a moment. So, find my notes. The first one is about creating your village. Build your support network before your baby arrives, if you can. Now, I don't think anyone here has got babies. All of our kids are a little bit older. I think it's never too late, really, to create your village, your support network. It's never too late to do that. But if you can do it before the baby's born, then you've got people in place and people around you to support you. I think it's really important as well that you have like-minded people around you, whatever your way of thinking is. If you've got like-minded people around you, not only will you have a better connection and flow better, but then they can also help, pass on the right kind of knowledge to your children, and they'll be saying the right kind of things as far as you're concerned. And your village can change as well. So throughout my parenting journey, I've had different kind of social groups, different people around me at different points. And each time in my life, I thought, this is it. I found my tribe, my real tribe. I found my village. And it served its purpose at the time. It's only really been in the last 2 to 3 years, I think, that I found my more permanent tribe since I've really discovered a lot more about what's going on in the world and a lot more about myself as well. I feel like it's taken me a long time to find, my real tribe. But, it can change. So the importance of the village, the tribe, it's not just about, I think, having other adults to support you. It's also about the children being around other adults as well. So I mentioned about the peer orientation. Like, quite often in our society, we have things going on for children and then things going on for adults. Yeah, there are family events, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot less of that than what there used to be, I think. So by having this group of people around you, you know that you can, do things all together with the children and the adults. And the children are getting that influence from the other adults as well as the other children. The next one is about, properly educate yourself on natural birthing, breastfeeding, child psychology and behaviour. So this is something that I didn't really realise before I had my first child. I thought that she would just be born and I would breastfeed her and it would all be lovely. I didn't realise that even within that, there's a lot of barriers that have been put in place so that women do not breastfeed successfully, or they're led to believe that they can't. But breastfeeding is such an important part of a parenting journey, obviously the mothering journey specifically, but fathers can be, involved in that. It's not, although the mother is feeding the child, the father can still be involved in that relationship. They can still be supportive. They can burp the baby afterwards, or they can sit together and hug while the baby's feeding, and you can have some really beautiful moments like that. So I wish that I'd known more about that before I had my first child. And the natural birthing, it's not always possible, of course it's not, but if a woman and a man, if they're educated on that before the baby's born, it's more likely to kind of go that way. Because we so often see in the mainstream narrative these really unnatural birthing situations, or situations that have become really normal, which, as I said before, are really detrimental. A woman on her back giving birth, that's the image that's shown to us. It's the worst possible position for women to be in to give birth. It really is. And then the child psychology and behaviour, that's something that you can read about, educate yourself on at any time, obviously not just before your baby's born, because child psychology is something that evolves as the child grows and evolves. And I've only skimmed the surface of this topic myself, but it has really helped me in my mothering journey, understanding a little bit more about their psychology and their behaviour. It's definitely helped me at times where I'm just like, what's going on? And the next one is be very mindful of where and who you are getting advice from. Remember, it's not always necessary to seek outside advice. Trust your instinct, your gut, listen to yourself and your baby or your child. Your baby or child is your best teacher. So that does kind of link in, I think, to the last point as well, and what I said earlier about the mainstream narrative. It's not, I don't believe it's all bad, everything in the mainstream narrative, but generally speaking, it's not going to be the most truthful or the most beneficial for us. So I think if something doesn't feel right, if you're reading something about children and it doesn't feel right to you, then the chances are it probably isn't right. You probably need to look somewhere else for help or advice. Or sometimes you just need to listen to your baby or your child, or look inside yourself. You don't always need somebody to tell you, but I think we've been conditioned that we need these experts to help us. And they can help us sometimes, but we can learn a lot just from trusting our instincts, definitely. Or, other members of our tribe, our support network, can be more reliable than these so-called experts. Next, establish a strong attachment right from the beginning and find ways to continue connecting and developing the bond as your child grows. So I think we just kind of imagine that we'll have a baby, and we'll love it and everything will be fine. And of course, love for our children is unconditional, but that doesn't necessarily always mean that you're going to have this strong connection or bond with them. That is something that you do have to actively participate in. So right from the beginning, in the early days, I suppose that goes with the breastfeeding, the baby wearing, sleeping with your child. These are just things which I have done, which have helped me to create that strong bond and attachment right from the beginning. And then as they grow older, it's things like reading stories to them, playing with them. Playing with our children is so important. Reading to them, I already mentioned that. And taking an interest in their interests. So some of the things that my kids are interested now, I would never choose to be interested in that myself. But actually, when I start asking questions and that about it, and I see how passionate they are about something, I then actually start to feel excited as well. And some of the things I've got into over the last few years, I would never have before. I was never interested in Harry Potter until I had children, for example. Now I'm reading it in French. I've read them all in English, now I'm doing them in French. So yeah, I think getting in touch with your inner child can help you to continue having that strong bond and connection with your child. Really making time for that as well. Even if it's only like 5-10 minutes every morning, I always try and make sure I check in with them in the morning so that every day we've had that little check-in. Sometimes it's only 2 or 3 minutes, but I just make sure that there's that some kind of connection. And a book I read actually, I think it was last year or the year before, which I'll recommend in the next slide, that has really helped me with the bonding. It's called The 5 Love Languages of Children. That's a concept that was created by, I think it's Ross Campbell, but yeah, I think it's on the next slide. Love languages, so they apply to not only children but adults as well, but there's a book specifically about the love languages of children, and it's tapping into how your children feel most loved. So you might be, for example, wanting to spend lots of time with them, but they're still a bit like, and you're like, what's going on? But actually, what they might really want is they might want you to be doing things for them rather than spending time with them. They might want you to be like helping them tidy their room. Do you know what I mean? There's different ways that we can love people. And tapping into that has really helped me to keep that bond with my children. The next one is to eliminate or at least minimise as many toxins as you can. Probably one of the most difficult things to do, but not impossible. You know, it's something that I'm still working on and working through. And it's something that you can do as and when you feel ready to as well. You know, it could be the food that you look at first. It could be that the medicine that you're using. It could be the products that you're using in your house to clean yourself, to clean your clothes. But it's better to kind of start somewhere and make some small changes. In my opinion, this is what I've been doing for several years now. And I feel like we have a lot less toxins in our house than we used to, but still not as little as I would like, but we're working on it. It's a work in progress. The next one is be the best role model you can be. Take a good hard look at yourself, your habits, your behaviours. Again, not always easy to do. Definitely not. But, you know, if we don't want our children to be stuck on their phones all the time, don't be stuck on your phone all the time. It seems quite simple, but we slip into habits very easily. It's so easy to slip into habits that are not very healthy, and then children pick up on them. So, yeah. This, again, is something that I've only really started to do in the last few years. Or maybe with the food, I started it quite early on, but with technology and other things, it's something I've only really started doing in the last few years. And it's been challenging, but I'm really pleased that I have worked on myself, you know, and focused on myself. I do feel like it's having a positive impact on my children. And then the next point is, it ties in with that, is do the shadow work. But I suppose the shadow work goes a bit deeper than just your sort of habits and behaviours. And you have to be really ready to do the shadow work as well. It's quite heavy work. For anyone who doesn't know what shadow work is, some people call it facing your demons. It's kind of linked with spirituality, but it's really about really getting to know yourself on a deep, deep level. Once we know ourselves on a deep, deep level, and we're, you know, being honest and true, and we're the best version of ourselves, then we're the best mum or the best dad that we can be, as well as the best version of ourselves. But that's something that takes a lot of time, many years. I've only just begun it, really. But even just starting it, even just being aware of it, actually, I think is a good starting point. And then next, it's about work to detach yourself from all the distractions as much as possible. So this is similar to the one about the toxins, eliminating the toxins. For most people, it will be something that is done gradually over time. And some distractions you may never be able to detach from, like work. But I found a way. I'm really lucky that I found a way to work that fits around our lifestyle, around our homeschooling lifestyle. So I'm lucky that I have very flexible working hours. I choose my own hours. So I have times when I'm not available for my children, but then when I am available, I'm very available. I'm there and I'm present. I'm not working. It's separate. Not everyone has that option, I know that. But then there's other distractions that you can try to detach yourself from. And then here are some of my favourite quotes about parenting from various different people. So the first one is, listen earnestly to anything your children want to tell you, no matter what. If you don't listen eagerly to the little stuff when they are little, they won't tell you the big stuff when they are big, because to them, all of it has always been big stuff. It's quite a wordy quote, but I really like that. You know, when a 3-year-old or a toddler finds a daisy and they think it's the most amazing thing in the world, like, join in that. Like, don't just disregard it like, yeah, it's a daisy. Just, again, touch into your inner child and try to see the world through their eyes and get down to their level and like, wow, yeah, it's a daisy. Really listen to them because, yeah, that's important to them. And if they feel that you're listening to what's important, then they will always come to you. Well, that's the hope. They will always come to you if there's something important. Or they're more likely to. The next quote, this is very apt for me at the moment with my broken ankle. We don't stop playing because we grow old. We grow old because we stop playing. So I'm always playing, and this is where it's landed me up. But I'm always playing with my children. I love playing. It's just so much fun, and it's not something that enough adults do, in my opinion. So play, be a big kid. Just don't break your ankle, if you can help it, or any other bones. But have fun, play. Play is so important. And the last quote is, our children need our presence, not our presents. I think a lot of people have heard that quote. It's quite a famous quote. Apparently Martin Luther King said that originally. I'm sure a lot of other people have said it since. Whilst children love receiving gifts, there's no doubt about that. You know, being with them and being present with them and available to them is so much more important than anything you could spend any money on. Definitely time over money every time. So here are some book recommendations. There's quite a few there. So the first few are about the really early days of parenting, so birth and breastfeeding. Michel Audent, he's a French guy who talks a lot about, you know, the importance of breastfeeding for the relationship and the link between the birth and breastfeeding as well. Childbirth Without Fear, that's a book I wish I read before I had my first child. And actually, although a lot of the fear is within the mother, it can be within the father as well. So these books are just as helpful, you know, for men to read as they are women, because if men understand more about it, they can better support the women. So yeah, I wish I had read that book before I had my first child, but I did discover it before the second one. And it made a huge difference to my birthing experience, a huge difference. The next one is The Fourth Trimester. I have to confess, I haven't read all of this book, but it's a book I've read kind of excerpts from, and it's been recommended to me by a lot of people. I used to do a lot of breastfeeding support work, so that's probably why I've read so many books on that particular topic and why a lot of books were kind of recommended to me. So yeah, the fourth trimester is, the idea, the baby's inside the mother for 3 months, but then when they come outside the womb, ideally there will be another trimester, a period of about 3 months, whereby the baby is as close to the mother at all times as possible to help the baby adjust to being earthside. You know, they've been in this really warm, comfortable space for 9 months, and then all of a sudden they're in this big world with bright lights and colours, and there should be an adjustment period for them rather than this separation that I said earlier. Putting a baby in a cot to sleep. I'm not judging anyone who does that, but to me it just felt almost barbaric. Like, this baby's just come out of me, it needs to be close to me. That was my instinct telling me to do that. So that's what that book talks about, is the importance of, keeping your baby close for the first 3 months. And again, fathers can help in that. Father can be cuddling the baby. It hasn't always got to be the mum or even grandparents, you know. Sweet Sleep is a book, kind of self-explanatory, speaks about like natural sleep patterns in children, babies, and that made a real difference to my parenting journey as well, because sleep can be quite a big topic, especially when they're young. I think this book goes up to when they're kind of toddler age, so it's quite sciencey in parts, but still easy to read. So yeah, it's a good book. It's a good balance, I think, between science and kind of just chatty narrative almost. And then the next book is by the guy that I said his name earlier, Gabor Mate. It's called Hold On To Your Kids. It is a fantastic book. It really is. It talks a lot about the peer orientation. That's what it's kind of centered around. But it does give a lot of ideas and solutions as well as to how you can kind of, keep that bond and keep your kids close. Because I know on a personal level, I really felt like in recent years, like I was losing my connection with my eldest. I feel like it's coming back. It is coming back. We're getting there. It's almost like you're pulling them in again. You know, they've drifted and drifted and drifted, and now I'm pulling her back in. The next one, for anybody who's kind of spiritually inclined or interested in spirituality, it's Soul to Soul Parenting, a guide to raising a spiritually conscious family. So, I read that, I think it was last year, and it gave me some good ideas on how to not kind of impose my beliefs on my children, but just to kind of make them aware of some things which I think are beneficial to them. The next one, The Explosive Child. So some children have quite explosive behaviour. I know one of mine did when they were younger, and this book gave me some really useful tools in dealing with that. And it actually does explain the psychology a little bit of the children, So understanding the psychological side of it and the biological side of it really aided me a lot. And then the final one is The 5 Love Languages of Children, by Gary and Ross Campbell. That was it. I think they're brothers. The love languages is a really fascinating concept. As I said, it doesn't just apply to children, but they decided to write one specifically about children, because even though the love languages are the same for adults and children, obviously you express it in different ways to children than you do to adults. And I think in terms of keeping the kind of connection and the bond with your children, that's probably one of the most important books that I've put up there for kind of older children, I suppose that is. And I think that's it. Yes, thank you for listening. I hope you've enjoyed it.
I know the time will come when we welcome everyone, even the young and the old. We're here to soothe